300 men stood against 1,000,000. One king became immortal. But here's what they don't tell you. The hero of Thermopylae was also the enforcer of history's most brutal state-sanctioned murder system, and the 300 weren't the only ones who died at his command. Every year, Leonidas oversaw the ritual murder of thousands of innocent people, not Persians, but Greece's own enslaved population. The very survival of Western civilization supposedly rested on this man's shoulders. But what if the cure was worse than the disease? By the end of this video, you'll understand why the real Leonidas was simultaneously Greece's greatest hero and its most efficient monster. You'll discover the horrifying training that created the 300 children forced to murder for food, why Leonidas chose death over tactical withdrawal and who really paid the price, and the systematic genocide he enforced that makes Persian barbarism look civilized. You think you know this story, the noble king, the impossible odds, the ultimate sacrifice, but hidden beneath the bronze and legend is a mathematical impossibility that shatters the myth. 300 versus 1,000,000, except the real numbers tell a different story. Here's the darker math no one mentions. 7 helots murdered for every one Spartan citizen every single year. That's not war. That's systematic extermination. 3 mysteries haunt the real Thermopylae. What happened to the Helot rebellion of 490 BC that Leonidas crushed? Why did a tactical genius choose certain death when retreat was possible? And what was the crypteia, the secret murder program that Leonidas himself survived and later commanded? To understand how one man could be both savior and monster, we need to go back to a blood-soaked December night in 490 BC. Sparta wasn't just a city-state. It was a prison camp masquerading as a civilization. By 490 BC, when our story begins, this military machine ran on a simple, terrifying equation: complete dominance through complete brutality. But here's what the histories won't tell you. Sparta's greatest enemy wasn't Persia. It was the 250,000 human beings they kept in chains. Meet the key players in this tragedy. Leonidas, whose name means lion's son, wasn't born to be king. He was the third son, the spare's spare, hardened by a childhood that would break most adults. His half-brother Cleomenes, the mad king, whose mysterious death would clear Leonidas's path to power. And Gorgo, Leonidas's niece and wife. Yes, you heard that correctly, the only woman in Sparta who could speak in the assembly, forged from the same iron as her husband. The number is staggering. 7 helots for every Spartan citizen. These weren't foreign captives but Greeks, descendants of the original inhabitants, reduced to agricultural slaves. Every autumn, Sparta declared war on its own helot population. Not metaphorical war, actual, legal war. This meant any Spartan could kill any helot without consequence. They called it maintaining order. We call it state terrorism. Listen carefully. You can almost hear the bronze on bronze as we examine Sparta's power structure. 2 kings ruled simultaneously, a system designed to prevent tyranny that instead created double the oppression. 5 ephors, elected annually, wielded the real power. The Gerousia, 28 elders over 60, decided who lived and died. And binding it all together, the agoge, the training system that turned boys into weapons. But Leonidas had one advantage Xerxes couldn't imagine. He'd survived the most brutal military training in human history. At age 7, the state had stolen him from his mother. What they gave back 23 years later wasn't human anymore. But how does a prince become a monster? It started when Leonidas was 7 years old. The agoge didn't create soldiers, it manufactured killers. When 7-year-old Leonidas was torn from his mother's arms in 520 BC, he entered a system designed to destroy everything weak, everything compassionate, everything human. This is where the story gets truly dark. Boys slept naked on reed beds they gathered themselves. Food, deliberately insufficient, forcing them to steal or starve. The punishment for theft wasn't for stealing. It was for getting caught. One boy, legend says, let a stolen fox gnaw through his stomach rather than reveal his crime. They called this education. Modern psychologists have another word: systematic torture. But wait, it gets worse. At age 12, each boy received a mentor, an adult warrior who would shape his development. The nature of these relationships. Let's just say Sparta's approach to pedagogy would horrify any civilized society. Then came the crypteia selection at 18. The most promising killers were sent into the countryside with daggers and a single order: kill helots, any helots. Bonus points for the strongest, the ones who might lead rebellions. Leonidas excelled. His instructors noted his particular efficiency, his ability to disconnect from the act. When he returned from his krypteia year with 17 confirmed kills, above average, they knew they had created something special, something monstrous. Then something happened that defied all military logic. In 490 BC, King Cleomenes, Leonidas's half-brother, died under mysterious circumstances. Found in prison, supposedly a suicide, though the wounds suggested otherwise. Leonidas, the third son who should never have ruled, suddenly ascended to the Aegean throne. His first act? Intensifying the agoge program. His reasoning: Persia grows strong. Sparta must grow harder. The selection of the 300 began years before Thermopylae. Leonidas didn't want the best warriors. He wanted men with living sons, men whose bloodlines would survive. But hidden in plain sight was an even more shocking truth. Each Spartan would bring 7 helos as support. That's 2,100 enslaved humans marching to certain death, their names erased from every record. Here's the part they cut from the movie: the physical transformation. By age 30, a Spartan warrior's body told the story of the agoge. Scars covered approximately 40% of their skin. Deliberately broken and reset bones created denser skeletal structures. Their pain tolerance exceeded normal human limits. Leonidas himself bore a distinctive scar from right eyebrow to left jaw, a training accident that nearly cost him an eye. The Persian threat had been growing since Darius's defeat at Marathon. When Xerxes inherited the throne, he inherited his father's humiliation and hunger for revenge. By 481 BC, reports reached Sparta. The largest army in human history was mobilizing. 2 million men, they said. The earth trembled beneath their march. Modern archaeologists found something that changes everything. Weapons caches dated to 481 BC, hidden throughout Spartan territory. Leonidas wasn't preparing for defense. He was preparing for something else entirely. The oracle at Delphi had whispered a prophecy. Either Sparta would fall, or a Spartan king would die. Leonidas had already made his choice. When the earth shook under 2 million Persian feet, Leonidas had already decided who would live and who would die. Dawn, August 480 BC. The march to Thermopylae began with a lie. Leonidas told the ephors he was leading a sacred guard to the Carneia festival. In reality, he was marching 300 Spartans and 2,100 helots toward certain death. But Leonidas smiled, because he knew something the ephors didn't. Day 1 covered 70 miles. The Spartans sang paeans, war hymns that echoed off mountain walls. Behind them, silent and loaded like pack animals, the helots carried the real weight: spare shields, replacement spears, food for warriors who saw them as expendable equipment. The ground literally changed color from the dust of their passage. But here's what really happened. 6,700 other Greeks joined them: Thespians, Thebans, Corinthians, Arcadians. History forgot their names because Sparta wrote the story. These weren't just allies, they were witnesses Leonidas would need to eliminate. The math was simple: dead men tell no tales. The Hot Gates earned their name from sulfur springs that reeked of the underworld. The pass, at its narrowest, spanned 50 feet, wide enough for maybe 8 men standing shoulder to shoulder. Mountains rose on one side, cliffs dropped to the sea on the other. Leonidas walked the ground like a man selecting his own grave. "Perfect," he said. His captain asked, "For defense?" Leonidas didn't answer. Then came the sound no soldier ever forgets. Persian scouts. Light cavalry, probing for weakness. The Spartans didn't form ranks. Instead, they exercised naked, combing their long hair. The psychological warfare had begun. One captured scout, brought before Leonidas, was released with a message. Tell Xerxes the sons of Heracles await. Scientists now know what really happened during those first negotiations. Xerxes sent envoys offering terms. Submit, keep your lands, become friends of the Persian Empire. Reasonable by any standard. Leonidas's response? He had the messengers watch as Spartans executed a group of helots for cowardice, a demonstration of Spartan justice. The message was clear: we are not reasonable men. The war council that night revealed fractures in the Greek alliance. The Phocians wanted to defend the mountain path. The Arcadians suggested naval support. But Leonidas had already positioned his Spartans at the narrowest point, claiming the honor of first contact. What followed defied every rule of ancient warfare. He ordered defensive positions abandoned, aggressive stance only. Unknown to the other Greeks, Leonidas had received intelligence about the Anopeia path over the mountains. A local named Ephialtes had already made contact, offering to guide Persians around the pass for gold. But wait, archaeological evidence suggests Leonidas knew about this secret path all along. Stone markers, clearly Spartan, have been found along the route. The betrayal was anticipated, maybe even encouraged. The smell alone drove men mad. 10,000 Persian horses, 200,000 men, the sulphur springs, the sea. As night fell on the second day, Greek allied forces numbered exactly 7,000. Against them, conservative estimates place Persian forces at 200,000, not the mythical millions. Still impossible odds, but Leonidas had one more card to play. That night he gathered his 300. Breakfast well, he told them. For tonight we dine in Hades. But to his helot contingent he gave different orders, orders that would horrify modern military ethicists. They were to hold the wings, absorb the arrow storms, buy time with their bodies. Not one chronicler recorded their names. The Thespians, all 700 of them, volunteered to stay. Their commander, Demophilus, was either incredibly brave or incredibly naive. He didn't know about Leonidas's final protocol, the one that would ensure no allied witness survived. Then Leonidas did something unthinkable. He sent away the other Greek forces. Tell them Sparta held, he said. They thought it was mercy. It was actually calculated murder. As dawn approached on the third day, Leonidas stood with 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, 400 Thebans, held against their will as suspected Persian sympathizers, and 2,100 helots. Approximately 3,500 men against an army that blackened the horizon. The real number will chill your blood, not because of its size, but because of how precisely Leonidas had calculated who would die. Then came the morning when Xerxes himself rode forward, and everything changed. 5:47 a.m., day 1. The bronze bell tone of struck helmets announced the beginning. Xerxes had sent his Median troops first, expendable forces, to test Spartan resolve. What happened next would haunt Persian soldiers for generations. The phalanx moved like a single organism, spears creating a hedge of death 8 feet beyond the shield wall. In 15 minutes, 500 Medians lay dying in the dust. The Spartan rotation system was mechanical genius. Every 15 minutes, fresh warriors rotated to the front. But look closer. Helots dragged away the wounded, held the flanks, died in droves. For every Spartan that fell, 7 helots perished. The ground became mud, but not from rain. Then something extraordinary occurred. The Spartans began their dance of death, the Pyrrhish. Seemingly retreating in disorder, they lured Persian forces into the narrow pass. Then, at a signal, they wheeled with parade ground precision. Spears found gaps in Persian armor with surgical accuracy. The funnel became an abattoir. Persian bodies piled so high they formed barriers. Xerxes watched from his golden throne as his Medians broke. Time for the professionals. Enter the immortals, 10,000 of Persia's finest, never before defeated. Their scale armor glittered like serpent skin. Their reputation alone had conquered cities. But the immortals had never faced the agoge's graduates. Here's the part no historian wants to admit. It wasn't courage that made Spartans superior. It was programming. Where Persians fought to live, Spartans had been taught to die. The phalanx pushed forward, a bronze glacier grinding everything in its path. Spears broke, replaced instantly by helot runners. When shields splintered, fresh ones appeared. The support system was invisible but essential. The killing became mechanical. Thrust, twist, withdraw. Step forward over the corpse, repeat. Persian arrows fell like rain. Witnesses spoke of the sky darkening. Dianekes, a Spartan officer, made his legendary quip, "Good, then we shall have our battle in the shade." But hidden beneath the bravado was calculation. Each Spartan carried only what he could use. Each helot carried replacement everything. By noon, Persian casualties mounted toward 2,000. Spartan losses, fewer than 50, though helot casualties already exceeded 200. The narrowness of the pass neutralized Persian numbers. Waves of attackers compressed into a killing field 50 feet wide. The mathematics of death favored the defenders, for now. But Xerxes had more than numbers. As afternoon sun blazed, he deployed psychological warfare. Musicians played to tire the mind. Incense burned to mask the stench of death. Fresh troops rotated in continuously, while the same Spartans held the line. This is where Leonidas's selection criteria proved genius. These men had trained together since childhood. They could fight blind, knowing exactly where their brothers stood. Night brought no relief. Persians attempted infiltration, sending Scythian troops through darkness. The Spartans were ready. They'd coated their bronze with mud to kill reflection, stationed helot sentries as tripwires. What followed wasn't battle but butchery. Persian night fighters, elite in their own right, died in darkness, killed by men who'd trained blindfolded since age 10. Day 2 dawned on a charnel house. Conservative estimates place first-day Persian casualties at 5,000. The myth says 20,000, but even 5,000 corpses in that narrow space created logistical nightmares. Persians couldn't retrieve their dead without entering the killing zone. Disease threatened. Morale plummeted. Xerxes deployed his reserve forces, Saka warriors, Bactrian cavalry, useless in the pass, Ethiopian marines. But then came the first crack in Spartan invincibility. Leonidas's own brother, Dorieus, took an arrow through the eye slit of his helmet. As he fell, Leonidas showed no emotion. The agoge had burned such weakness away. But the other Greeks saw something that changed everything. Spartans could die. The second day's fighting reached new levels of savagery. Persians adopted Spartan tactics, pushing with shields, trying to compress the battlefield further. For the first time, the phalanx buckled. Alpheus and Maron, sons of the same Spartan family, died within minutes of each other. The Thespians, fighting alongside, began to grasp the mathematics. At this rate, they had hours, not days. Then came Xerxes' masterstroke. He offered a noon truce, ostensibly to collect the dead. During this pause, he had Leonidas shown something, captured Greek scouts, men who'd discovered Persian forces moving along the mountain path. The betrayal was complete. Ephialtes had sold the passage for 30 talents of gold. Listen to what happened next, because it defies all military logic. Any competent commander would retreat, save the army, fight another day. Leonidas had hours before encirclement. The pass could be abandoned. Lives could be saved. Instead, he smiled, that cold reptilian expression the agoge perfected. "Continue," he ordered. The afternoon fighting reached crescendos of violence. Persians threw everything, fire arrows, attacking in waves designed to exhaust. Elite units mixed with fodder to confuse targeting. The Spartan response was a technique called the othismos, a massive push designed to use the phalanx's weight as a weapon. Men in the rear ranks literally pushed those in front, creating pressure that crushed Persian formations. But the cost mounted. Proclus, the Spartan Olympic victor, fell with 17 wounds. Eurytus, despite being nearly blind from an eye infection, demanded to be led to the line. He died within minutes but took 6 Persians with him. These weren't just casualties, they were the erosion of irreplaceable expertise. As dusk fell on the second day, a war council convened. The Phocian contingent guarding the mountain path reported Persian movement. Encirclement was perhaps 6 hours away. This was the moment of decision: flee or die. The Thespian commander Demophilus spoke first. "We stand with Sparta," noble words that signed 700 death warrants. But Leonidas's response revealed the monster beneath the hero. He dismissed the allied contingents, all except the Thespians who'd volunteered, and the Thebans he suspected of Persian sympathies. To his captain he gave orders that would chill your blood. When encirclement comes, ensure no one escapes. No one. The captain understood. This wasn't about glory. It was about controlling the narrative. That night, Leonidas prepared his final gambit. He gathered the 300, now reduced to perhaps 250 effectives. His speech, recorded by the sole Spartan survivor, was not about freedom or Greece. It was about immortality through death, about becoming more than men. But to the 1,800 surviving helots, he gave different orders: hold the wings at all costs, absorb the arrows, buy time with bodies. The final dawn came with Persian trumpets from 3 directions. The immortals had circled through the mountains, the main force pressed the front, naval elements threatened the flank. Encirclement was complete. What followed wasn't a last stand. It was orchestrated mass suicide designed to create a legend. The Spartans abandoned the wall, fighting in the open to kill more before dying. But here's what they don't tell you. As the battle became hopeless, Leonidas ordered something unthinkable. The helots, who'd served so faithfully, were to be killed first. Not by Persians, but by Spartans. No witnesses, no slaves returning to speak of what they'd seen. The Thebans, trying to surrender, were cut down by their supposed allies. The final phase became legend. Leonidas fell early, his body becoming a rallying point. Persians and Spartans literally fought over his corpse. When spears broke, they fought with swords. When swords broke, with hands and teeth, Dionysus, the wit, died snarling jokes. The final group made their stand on a small hill, now marked by a lion monument. But the ending came not with swords but arrows. Xerxes, perhaps sickened by the casualties, modern estimates suggest 20,000 Persians dead for 4,000 Greeks, ordered his archers to finish it. The sky truly did go dark then. Arrows fell so thick that bodies looked like pincushions. The last Spartan standing, name unknown, was found with over 40 arrows in his shield, still upright in death. As Leonidas fell, pierced by 20 arrows, he smiled, because death was just the beginning of his plan. The final stand, dissected minute by minute, reveals the true horror. 6:15 a.m., encirclement complete. 6:45 a.m., Leonidas orders the advance into open ground. 7:30 a.m., Leonidas falls. Fighting begins over his body. 8 a.m., surviving Spartans reform on the hillock. 8:30 a.m., arrow storm begins. 8:47 a.m., last recorded movement. In 2 hours and 32 minutes, 3,500 Greeks died. But the mathematics hide darker truths. Immediately after the battle, Xerxes ordered a body count. Persian dead, between 15,000 and 20,000, including 2 of Xerxes' own brothers. Greek dead, approximately 4,000, but the proportions tell the real story. Of 300 Spartans, 298 died. 2 had been sent away as messengers. Of 700 Thespians, none survived. Of 400 Thebans, none survived. Of 2,100 helots, here's where the records go suspiciously silent. What happened to Leonidas's body violates every rule of ancient warfare. Xerxes, in rage over his losses, ordered it crucified and beheaded. Sacrilege by both Greek and Persian standards. But the mutilation served Leonidas's purpose. It transformed a military defeat into a martyrdom. The headless king became more powerful than the living one ever was. But wait, 2 Spartans survived, and their fate reveals Sparta's true nature. Aristodemus, sent away with an eye infection, returned to Sparta in shame. Despite fighting heroically a year later at Plataea, seeking death in battle, he was never forgiven. Pantites, sent as a messenger, hanged himself rather than face Spartan contempt. Survival was the only unforgivable sin. The immediate political aftermath was calculation masked as grief. The 700 Thespians who died. Their city-state was too small to dispute Sparta's version. The 400 Thebans, branded as traitors who tried to surrender, their reputation destroyed. The thousands of other Greeks who'd fought earlier, edited from the story. But the 2,100 helots? They simply vanished from history as Leonidas intended. Here's something that changes everything: archaeological evidence from the battle site. Mass graves were found, yes, but separated by class even in death. The Spartan remains, identified by their bronze, were buried with honors. But surrounding them, in unmarked pits, thousands of skeletons showing signs of violence, not all from Persian weapons. Some wounds match Spartan spear patterns. The killing of witnesses had been thorough. The cover-up began immediately. Spartan survivors, the messengers sent away before the final battle, spread a carefully crafted narrative. 300 Spartans against 1,000,000 Persians. No mention of allies until pressed. No mention of helots ever. The story spread faster than truth could catch it. By the time accurate accounts arrived, myth had replaced memory. But Thermopylae's greatest deception wasn't about numbers, it was about what kind of man Leonidas really was. In Sparta, his death triggered not mourning but intensification. The agoge became harsher. The crypteia murders increased. The helot population, hearing whispered truths about Thermopylae, grew restive. Sparta's response: more blood, more control, more monuments to their glorious dead. The Greek city-state's reaction was exactly what Leonidas had calculated. His death became a rallying cry, uniting fractious Greeks against Persia. Within a year, Greek forces would crush Xerxes at Salamis and Plataea. The sacrifice had worked, not the 300's sacrifice, but the 4,000's. And none of them had been asked if they wanted to be martyrs. Modern forensics reveal more uncomfortable truths. Skeletal analysis shows malnutrition in the helot remains, men who marched to war already weakened by deliberate starvation. Weapon distribution patterns suggest helots were placed specifically to absorb missile fire. They weren't auxiliary troops, they were human shields, and archaeology proves it. Then something happened that Sparta couldn't control. Veterans talked. Not Spartans, but allies who'd been dismissed before the final day. They spoke of Leonidas's strange orders, of helots herded like cattle, of the Theban betrayal that looked more like murder. But these voices were drowned in the thunder of Sparta's propaganda machine. The transformation was complete. A tactical defeat became strategic victory. A king who chose death over shameful survival became the model for Western military virtue. And 2,100 murdered slaves? They became nothing. Not even a footnote, just as Leonidas had planned when he smiled through those 20 arrows. But Thermopylae's greatest deception wasn't about numbers, it was about what kind of man Leonidas really was. The myth-making process began before the blood dried. Within a generation, 7,000 defenders became 300. Allied Greeks vanished from memory. The helots, they never existed in the official version. Herodotus, writing just 50 years later, already reported the legend over facts. By the time Plutarch wrote, Thermopylae had become pure propaganda, a story about freedom defended by history's least free society. But Leonidas had embodied Spartan values perfectly. This was a society that institutionalized child abuse, that murdered its enslaved population annually, that saw compassion as weakness. The agoge that created Leonidas created monsters by design. Modern archaeological evidence from Spartan sites reveals mass graves, children's bones showing signs of fatal trauma, confirmation of ancient rumors about exposure of imperfect infants. Consider what we celebrate when we honor the 300. These weren't freedom fighters, they were the enforcement arm of a totalitarian state. Sparta had no art, no philosophy, no culture beyond war. While Athens built the Parthenon, Sparta built nothing but soldiers. While Socrates questioned, Spartans only obeyed. The defenders of Western civilization represented its darkest possible path. The crypteia, which Leonidas had survived and commanded, deserves special attention. Each year, Sparta declared war on its helot population, not metaphorical war, but legal authorization for murder. Young Spartans would hunt human beings for sport, targeting the strongest, the smartest, anyone who might lead resistance. Conservative estimates suggest 2,000 helot deaths annually. Across Sparta's centuries of dominance, we're talking about systematic murder approaching genocide. Here's the historical irony. Sparta's brutal system ultimately destroyed it. By 371 BC, barely a century after Thermopylae, Spartan military dominance was broken forever at Lycurgan. Why? They'd killed too many of their own people. The Spartan citizen population had shrunk to unsustainable levels. The helots they'd terrorized for centuries finally broke free. The city that lived by the spear quite literally died by it. But the myth outlived the reality. Romans admired Spartan discipline. Renaissance thinkers praised their sacrifice. Modern military academies study Thermopylae as heroic last stand. Films glorify the 300, while forgetting the 6,700, especially the 2,100 enslaved humans who died unnamed. We've transformed a slave society's enforcers into freedom's champions. Ask yourself this question. If Leonidas returned today, what would he recognize? Not democracy, which Sparta despised. Not individual freedom, which Sparta crushed. Not mercy, which Sparta saw as weakness. He'd recognize only the willingness to sacrifice lesser people for greater causes. He'd recognize the strong crushing the weak and calling it virtue. The real lesson of Thermopylae isn't about courage or sacrifice. It's about how history gets written by the survivors, how propaganda becomes truth, how we mistake brutality for strength. 300 men did stand against an empire, but they stood on the bones of thousands more. Now you know the truth. The lion's son was exactly what Sparta made him, a perfect killer who died perfectly, ensuring his victims' silence. Some monsters wear lion skins. Some monsters become heroes, and sometimes 2,500 years isn't long enough to wash the blood away. 300 Spartans and 20,000 forgotten dead. That's the real mathematics of Thermopylae. That's the real legacy of Leonidas. Remember that.